I'm delighted to lead today's conversation entitled Equal Pay, Knowing Your Worth, and Getting a Raise. It's actually something that I have talked a lot about with my girlfriends, and I think all of us have as women in business and in our careers. So here on the stage with me, I have Cindi Leive, editor-in-chief of Glamour magazine, former Michigan Governor Jennifer Granholm, who is currently Distinguished Adjunct Professor at UC Berkeley School of Law and Goldman School of Public Policy, and Representative Jackie Speier from California. So thank you all for joining us today. And let's get started. I mean, I think we're going to kind of look at this in three different areas. I think one of the big questions is, why is this even an issue? I mean, are you surprised that we're in 2014, almost 2015, and this is a panel at a Women Rule event?
I'm surprised, and I think more than that, Glamour's 19 million readers are incredibly surprised when they learn this, because to put this in context, and I see a lot of women in the demographic out there, these are women who have grown up playing sports with boys and experiencing equality in the classroom, and more women are getting college degrees now, as we all know, than men, and I'm sure you've talked about that today. And then they get into the workforce and they're like, what? The wage gap is not going to close for another 40 years at this pace? They're just stunned by it.
Right. And I mean, Congressman Speier, you've seen this play out over and over again on Capitol Hill. We had this move through, a chance to have it move through Congress and the Senate. Senate Democrats took it up. Do you have any chance, you think, that there's going to be any equal pay bill that would move next Congress when the Republicans are in control?
No.
The short and sweet answer.
Now, keep in mind that the Equal Pay Act was first put in place by President Kennedy in the 1960s. And through this evolution, women are now making 78 cents for every dollar earned by a man doing the same job. And what that means is that $10,000 less per year in income, which means over a woman's working lifetime of 40 years, it's over $400,000 of lost income. It's real money, and it's time that we fix it.
You know, what's sort of interesting is that if things were more transparent, this just would not be an issue. So, you know, I've worked a large part of my career in the public sector, and the salary schedules are public. Everything is public, so you can know going in, you know, whether you're being devalued or not. In the private sector, you just don't have access so much to that information, and it makes it much more difficult. I think that in other countries, some of this is more public. It would be an interesting exercise to see what the great pushback would be on the private sector by making some of this more transparent.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you look at the person next to you and you have no clue what they're making necessarily, depending on how they were able to come into the job. But talk to me, Cindi, a little bit about the frustration. That's what your survey really showed, right?
Yeah,
that's out there.
We've surveyed women now for several years running, and in fact, the first surveys were done in the 80s, and there is just this constant sense of dissatisfaction. Women believe they're not being paid fairly, and of course, as we all know, they're right. Now, with that, you're talking about transparency. Women are, and this is just in the last couple of years, starting to talk to one another more about what they make, and I think that's a fantastic trend. We found this year that 59% of young women had talked to a colleague about how much she made, and many, I think about 70%, also knew in general what the going rates were for people in their position in their industry. But what they're not yet doing is taking that information, going, asking for a raise, negotiating a starting salary.
And so what's interesting about this is that because you can talk to one another, and you can go to monster.com, you can go to job sites and see what the relative information is out there. You can go armed to negotiate. But that's what women are not doing. They're not asking, and they're not going armed. So here's what the research shows. The research shows that right out of college, 57% of men seeking a professional job negotiate in that first job offer. 57%. You know what the percentage is for women? 7. I mean, come on, what is it that's going on? So here is what the information also shows, is that those who are deciding who gets the offer, they don't like it, particularly when women negotiate for that first start. They view that as being sort of socially incompetent, whereas a guy, of course, you know, he's one of the guys. He's going to do a great job for the company. So there's a lot of research that's been done about this, about what women can do, because you're in a double bind, right? If you don't negotiate for it, you don't get it. You don't get it, then you're losing out on a lifetime of earnings. What they say is the bummer part of this is that you have to recognize that whether you are interviewing with a man or a woman, women are just as bad about this, you have to go into it as a female, bringing some of the female qualities. Now, what that means is that they say women should go in a collaborative sense and say, okay, here is what I bring to the organization. Here's how I can add value to. Here are my skills. And here, by the way, in a very nice way, I've done the research, and here's what people who have my skills are comparably paid. So you have to both do the research and approach it in a way that adds value to the conversation, and then you're viewed favorably. But if you go in and say, if you're playing hardball from the beginning, you won't get hired, basically.
The other thing that's important to remember is the Lilly Ledbetter Act that most of you are probably now familiar with, that we were able to get passed and signed into law by President Obama. Lilly Ledbetter was a woman who worked for Goodyear Tire Company for over 20 years as a manager and was being paid less. And it wasn't until the end of her career that someone slipped her a note in her mailbox that showed her that she did not make the same amount of money. She sues. The Supreme Court of the United States said, you should have made that claim within 180 days of first being hired. Now, she didn't know about it because Goodyear had a policy of not sharing that information with each other. So now the law, as a result of the Lilly Ledbetter Act, provides that you have 180 days after you become aware of it. So every time there is a new pay period in effect, you are creating that opportunity to speak up.
So we've kind of gone through the whole gamut from what's the problem, we all feel frustrated, to how to actually negotiate. You all have been in positions where you're in charge and you're hiring people, you're having people negotiate. Can you tell me the best and the worst kind of tactics you've seen, what has worked for you?
I think good timing counts for a lot. I mean, this isn't possible in every company. Sometimes there's an annual review moment. That's the only moment you get to ask. If you're in a unionized position, obviously things are different. But if you can go ask for a raise at any time, do it when you're coming off of a project that where you've just contributed something significant to the bottom line of the company, or you really helped your boss or your supervisor look good in front of her bosses, and take that moment to go to her to say, this is what I've contributed. You've grown my responsibilities. I'm really excited about being here. I'd like to talk about getting my salary closer to the XYZ mark.
In fact, you were saying the first time to have this conversation is not when you're really ticked off about what you've learned, right? The first time to have this conversation is in a way where you can add value. In politics, we say this all the time, trying to recruit women. You guys have heard about this all day today, about how difficult it is to recruit women because women do not like to raise their hand. They don't want, you have to ask them a lot. Well, in this raise kind of situation, women, if they have the mindset of, like in politics, it's not about you, but about what the value is you're bringing to the company, then it makes it a little bit of an easier conversation. It's not about you running for office, not about me, although in this case it might be a little bit about me. But it's about how you can bring value to either public office or to the company, and do it at a point where you can make your case convincingly with data, both about what the comparables are and your own assets that you're bringing.
What do you see on Capitol Hill?
Well, I think the other thing to point out is that the data shows that men are more likely, 7 times more likely to ask for more money than women. You can't ask for too much in my book, because in truth, you're probably selling yourself short anyway. So on Capitol Hill, it's very transparent. Everyone can see what everyone else is making, and there are ranges of salaries. So I think there's more equity there to the extent that women are gaining more of the chief of staff positions, for instance, than they ever have before. And I think we're seeing great improvement there.
One of the things that your survey found, too, was this kind of contradictory thing where women were upset that they weren't getting paid as much, but also were feeling that having flexible hours was very important, and maybe that and having passion with their work was more important. So it's an interesting push-pull we're seeing.
Young women in particular value a lot of things in addition to salary. Yes, they want the salary, but they also want the flexible hours. They want ultimately to be able to craft something that gives them a career that gives them some work-life balance. But what I find is that sometimes in young women's minds there's this sense of it's one or the other, and if I go ask for a lot of money money, then I'm going to somehow owe the company, and I'm not going to be able to leave at 5 for that soccer game or do whatever. So they don't ask, because then they feel like they're not beholden to the company's hours. And in fact, it is just the opposite. The more senior you get in your career and the more leverage you have in your business, whatever it is, the more you will be able to write your own hours and to write hours that are humane for the other women and men in your company.
And the research also shows that if you go and you ask for a package, not just the salary piece, but these are the things I need in order to be successful for you. And if you include flexibility and you include salary and you include whatever leave you need, that is the best way to approach a negotiation.
And let me also say, it doesn't change even when you're a member of Congress. You may not be asking for a salary increase, but you're asking for a different position on a different committee or a leadership position, and you have to make your case as well. Sometimes you get rebuffed for all the wrong reasons, but that doesn't mean you don't go back again.
And don't take it personally.
Not much.
Or if you do take it personally, get revenge. But anyway, because it flips anyway.
Do you see any difference? I mean, these are kind of mentorship conversations that we're having here, that the mentors you had maybe 40 or 50 years ago as women were just coming up, as now kind of, do you see this as a responsibility to try to help younger women as they kind of emerge as leaders?
I think so, and younger men too. I mean, I think it's about, showing everybody in the workforce that women can do well and achieve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. I think, we have a responsibility, obviously, and you've had a panel on this, on mentoring and how important it is for us to be able to reach behind. And those of us who are in positions, I often say that once you get through the glass ceiling, you don't just brush the shards of glass from your hair and say, I got mine, you go get yours. You have a responsibility to reach down through the hole and bring other people up. And that is, it may or may not have happened for you, but it should happen to others because of you.
I think we have a moral obligation. And I like to call it femtoring.
Femtoring?
Femtoring?
Instead of mentoring.
Oh, fentoring. I thought you were like a femtory challenge. Okay.
Preemptory.
Right.
I do think it's important, though, for men to mentor women as well. I think if it's only, yes, as women, we can share our experiences, and that's invaluable, hearing how women more senior than you have negotiated. But, I think if everybody at a particular company, men and women, sees it as to the company's benefit to groom the next generation of female leaders, then we're really in business.
Yeah.
All right, we are almost out of time, but I want to kind of toss it to each of you and have one kind of tip that you would give everybody out here who, in the next 6 months, or maybe they already feel like they've been underpaid for the last, 10 years, a real concrete thing that you can help them either work in your career or, to just keep in mind.
I think, first of all, just ask. In our survey, again, many women had never negotiated, but those who did, 80% who had asked for a raise got one. So you have to ask, otherwise you're just not in the business. And shoulders back.
Right, there is something about posture that you can grow into the position. Amy Cuddy has a great TED Talk about this, that you can live the position and it becomes, you internalize it. But I would say, please don't be passive. I just hate it when people on my team are waiting. Don't wait. Get out there and be proactive, whether it's about you or about anything else. Waiting, I think, is a disaster. So don't be passive and grow into the shoes that you were given.
And don't be passive aggressive.
That too.
And look for someone that you can reach out to and ask them to be your femtor. Sometimes we feel that someone has to tap us on the shoulder. Reach out to someone, ask them if they will help you, if they will help guide you. And I think it's really worthwhile to kind of write down all your skills. And if you're going to make a pitch, and we expect that you're going to be making a pitch in the near term, sometimes document it. And when your boss can look at it and see, my goodness, you've really done a great deal, it creates the kind of gravitas that's necessary that gets you where you want to go.
All right, well, unfortunately, we're out of time for this conversation, but thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insight in this important conversation.